I got really lucky that Lisa came to the studio one time. She was on a book tour and her daughter came too. And so they came to my office and watched some stuff. And I was like, can I just ask you one question? Um, how is anxiety good for us? Like how can it help teenagers? What is the good side? And she's like, oh, sorry, envy. Envy's amazing. Like it can help you set goals. It can be motivating. It's about like looking at the world and people around you and saying, oh, I would like to be more like that. Like they are the captain of the hockey team. What do I need to do to achieve that goal? And it's only and actually that like, especially within teenagers, when they don't have control over the situation. So things like having a luxury handbag that, your friend has, but you just don't have the money for that. That's when envy gets ugly.
Welcome to Kingdom of Dreams podcast. I actually saw Inside Out 2, believe it or not, yesterday.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow. I'm honored.
yeah, because I had meant to see it with my kids, but they went with their cousins, and it just got busy. But I made a point yesterday, obviously, because we're gonna chat, because I love the first one, and I knew that this was gonna be special with all the new emotions and everything. And what a wonderful little film. Thank you so much for being part of it. It was truly, truly amazing experience.
Oh, thank you. Good. Well, I'm glad it's fresh to talk about for you. So,
Yes,
it's
yes.
definitely embedded in my brain. So,
Yeah, I actually, when the credits started rolling, I was going down the steps and I'm waiting for your name to pop up. And as I'm about to go out the door and I see him like, okay, there she is. Exit. So it was really cool.
oh, you didn't
Uh,
even say for the secret final scene.
oh no, there's a scene. Okay,
Maybe
well,
your
that's
kids
okay.
stayed for it.
Probably they love that kind of stuff. I just had to get out and get going and to take care of some things. But good to know that you're. I mean, you mentioned this in the email, but obviously going through your credits that you had worked with Tim Johnson at
Mhm.
DreamWorks and other things. You know, so that's where your career sort of began before we get into Inside Out 2 at DreamWorks.
Yeah, well, I actually started in live action. So my very first feature was a live action movie by Robert Altman, Dr. T and the Women.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also worked on 1 Hour Photo as The Apprentice, with Jeff Ford as the lead editor. And that was an amazing experience. And then, yeah, a woman I had met when I interned, Susan Fitzer. She was an amazing mentor to me, and she's the one that pulled me onto the Robert Altman movie. And then we stayed in touch, and she transitioned into animation and called me when she was on Over the Hedge and said, I know you've never worked in animation. I'll train you in the parts you don't know, but I'd love to work with you again, and I think you'll really like it. And so she pulled me over to DreamWorks. Yeah, working with Tim and Carrie was my first job on Over the Hedge, and I loved animation. I love how collaborative it is. I love just how much people really invest in each other and invest themselves in the movie. So yeah, I've been hooked ever since.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So tell me how you got, I mean, obviously you're at Pixar, so that's one reason. Uh, you know, but being involved in Inside Out 2 and how did that journey sort of start based
Sure.
on what you were doing?
Yeah. So I had actually moved to Connecticut to be the lead editor on Nimona. And I was there when, I loved working with Troy and Nick and working on that movie. It meant a lot to me. And unfortunately Blue Sky was shut down. And but fortunately, I found out that Pixar was open to hiring a lead editor from outside the company, which pretty much almost never happens. So I was really excited and I applied. And keep in mind, I had applied for the Pixar internship and didn't get it. I had applied for assistant editor roles at Pixar and never got them. So I knew it was a long shot, but I wanted to try. And Pixar had been kind of related to Nimona. Like they had seen a few of our screenings and stuff along the way.
Mm.
So a few of the people there were kind of aware of me and Nimona. And I had a gauntlet of interviews. I met with 6 different teams the day I interviewed at Pixar. And I didn't really know who might be interested in me or which shows, but I knew that Inside Out 2 was the project I was really, really hoping for. And I got a call that Mark and Kelsey wanted me, and I was just so ecstatic because I loved the first movie. It's such an amazing world to get to explore and enjoy and connect to. So it was a really exciting moment when I got that call.
That's amazing. we all have sort of grown up with Pixar, right? Like, from Toy Story onwards. For me personally, I have seen every Pixar movie and more or less enjoyed every one of them up until Onward. I think that's what it's called, right? And then I wasn't too crazy about some of the films that came in between, but when I saw Inside Out 2 yesterday, it just brought back that whole feeling. And this is just a personal view. It doesn't mean that that's how they were. That whole feeling of Pixar for me, like the reason I got into, Toy Story at the first place and Incredibles and all these other Finding Nemo, Finding Dory, and all these incredible films. It just had so much heart and it's relatable at every level, right? Because all those emotions are something that we go through. And dealing with anxiety, emotion, I'm just curious how when you're editing something like that, naturally everybody who's watching it or directing it or editing it or doing music, they're going through all those emotions, right?
Absolutely.
What were the emotions that you were going through at the time? It's natural to be, you know, all those things. Like if you want to share anything about that, that'd be really cool to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, yeah, I'm so happy to hear you connected with it, and it's meant so much to hear from friends and family members, and just about the conversations that it sparked the movie, and just how relatable it feels. Because I think we all on the crew brought so much of ourselves to the movie and talked about our own personal experiences as 13-year-olds, and also like what people saw their kids going through. So we really wanted it to feel true and relatable, and yet a very, unique story to Riley and who she is as well. So, I will say it was a careful balance when we were editing of like how much anxiety is too much, for the movie and for you to want to, be part of the movie the whole way along. And it was something when we were recording our reference actors, our reference actresses who were anxiety, until we would record Maya, did amazing, and like they worked so hard, but Maya brought such an empathy to that character just through her voice and her performance that really helped with the balance of like believing that anxiety wants the best for Riley and you wanting to spend time with anxiety. Because if she's just ratcheted up to a 10 the whole time, the audience cannot, like, even I, as an audience of our internal screenings, like, it wasn't fun to sit through. So it's something that we really worked through. And certainly during the different phases of the movie, I probably went through every emotion you saw on screen, because we all just were working so hard, to make this movie the best it could be. And we all just wanted it to be great.
One of the coolest things about anxiety emotion was, and that goes to hats off to the animators, directors, and everybody else, is that constant face that anxiety had, like that smile, but there was no smile. Literally is when I image now, think about when I think about the emotion anxiety, just in general, or read about it, that's the reference point that comes to mind now. And it's just, yeah, it's just beautiful the way that film was done. Your process in editing it, tell me a bit about it. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of animation directors and, I know the process of post-production animation is somewhat different, in some cases quite a bit different than live action. Tell
Mhm.
me about that process because you had done a little bit of work on live action. So just differentiating that and, telling our audience what that's about.
Sure. So the biggest difference is that in live action, we really simplify things, that editorial starts after the shoot is done. Like everything's shot and then edit starts. They'll slowly ramp up during the shoot in terms of showing dailies and starting rough cuts of scenes. Versus in animation, we're really doing the most editing, the most iteration and creative editing work before the shoot starts because we consider the shoot animation, right?
Mhm.
So the best time, the most affordable time, and like the most creative time for us to iterate is when we're in the storyboard phase. So before anything enters that 3D digital pipeline. Layout is also a very iterative phase here at Pixar, which is great. We're really exploring with the camera and continuing to reshape the scenes. But once it gets to animation, like we really need to have our dialogue locked in. Every frame matters in terms of hitting deadlines, like getting everything together and the amount of work involved. And animations also then feeding departments like effects and simulation. So that's like cloth, hair, fire, water, all of that, if a few frames change for them, it really starts impacting a lot of people at once. So that's why I love it, is like there's so much exploration time the first year and a half, 2 years, when you're in story. It's a wonderfully creative time where edit and story work together so closely with the director.
What's the time duration that you worked on Inside Out 2 from the first day until, the final screening and it was locked and everything?
Yeah, so I mean, I was technically on for over it's like 1100 days. I was just I had to do a presentation for something else, so I know that it's like 1100 days. So it's over 3 years. So because I was technically on until the release date, there's just, there's still like archiving and other work we're kind of doing to clean up an editorial, which was great. Like I was on as soon as that script got approved and they were ready to start board artists, I was brought on. So I've been through every single iteration, which this movie changed a lot through every internal screening. We had emotions that came and went, all of that. So I feel very embedded in this story and these characters.
What were some of the emotions that came and went?
Yeah. So our very first screening, first of all, Riley didn't play hockey. She played ukulele in a talent show, which was like a huge thing that we realized by the second screening we wanted hockey back. But that screening we had, I think, 8 new emotions come in. So it was still anxiety, ennui, embarrassment were there, but it was also an envy, suspicion, infatuation, surprise, and Schadenfreude was the last one. So, we put that screening up and we quickly realized like 8 new characters. It's so much to
Too
keep those
much.
characters active and busy, like they're great. They're all great emotions and so much fun to play with, but you've already got your core 5 that you really want to spend time with. So to try to like find arcs and storylines and all this for 8 other characters, it was too much storytelling to try to do.
I bet I would be really interested to see Suspicion if there is Inside Out 3, because that is something that I think a lot of us have a problem with. We're always suspecting of others and what they're up to and what they're not up to. That would be a really cool thing to
Absolutely.
explore.
It's funny, Suspicion made it through a couple screenings, and the first character designs are still going on while we're boarding, so nothing's finalized. But the first version
Yeah.
of Suspicion had like a trench coat and like a hat, kind of looked around, darted eyes. And then the second version went more into like rebellion Suspicion, and so it was kind of punk rock. Anyway, it was just interesting to have a few different takes on it before we had to say goodbye.
That is so cool. That is really cool. What was it working like with how big was your team, first of all, in
So
post-production?
yeah, so my team kind of ebbed and flowed depending on the cycles we were in, but kind of my core team for the last year was me, 2 second editors, Dave and Fiona, who are fantastic, my first assistant, John Vargo, who was with me from, the very first weeks of the show till the end. And then we had 3 second assistant editors, as well as an apprentice editor. So it was a pretty big team.
That's awesome. And if you can talk about a little bit of your workflow from an editor standpoint, um, and the team that you mentioned, what would that be? Like, who would do what and how that would come to you and back and forth?
Sure. Yeah. I'll try. And again, it's something that keeps evolving. So,
I get
when
it.
we're,
Yeah.
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 So when we're in the story phase, my amazing team of assistant editors, they're responsible for every import and export. So when story has storyboards ready, they're getting them into the Avid for us. Avid Media Composer is what
Yep.
we're cutting on
Yep.
here. And then when we have a cut ready to send back to story for fixes, they're the ones doing the exports. And that keeps evolving as layout comes on, as animation comes on, because all those departments are waiting for a cut from us before they start their work. And so, I mean, they're doing development and stuff. I don't want to minimize the prep work
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
doing, but and then our assistant editors also are essential for all of our dialogue. So whether it's reference dialogue, people around the studio, they are at every recording session, they log it, they transcribe it, they do a lot of organizational work so that basically, if Amy Poehler recorded a line in year 1, I can find it in year 3 just based off, a word search. So that's the organization that they do is essential for us because of the long lifespan of these projects. John Vargo, the first assistant, is managing their workload. We work really closely to help figure out priorities and kind of what's, look for roadblocks ahead. And then me, Dave, and Fiona, we're splitting up the sequences for editing. So, we'll each take a sequence. Dave and Fiona will pass them back to me, and then they'll be in here for the edit reviews with the director, the story supervisor, as we're reviewing those sequences. And, we have these internal screenings anywhere from about 4 to 6 months apart, depending on the phase we're in.
Hmm.
And so we want to review each sequence ideally twice before we're putting all, the screening together at least. I prefer to watch as many sequences as we can together. So instead of just working on one sequence at a time, getting to watch 2 or 3 in a row, 10-minute chunks. If we've got all of Act 1 ready, let's put Act 1 up, just because I think context is so important, and you can really easily spin out polishing 3-minute scenes that then when you put it in, in full context, you realize, well, it needs to be only 2 minutes. So we need, we
Yeah.
need to figure out how to get that time out, or maybe it doesn't fit in the movie anyway. So that's kind of like during the story phase, what everybody's doing. And then as we move down the pipeline, layouts coming in, but certain scenes are still in storyboards. So because we're not sending everything all at once to animation, everything's in different phases. So then as we're recording our production actors, we're basically replacing every single reference line, obviously with our real actors, and they do amazing ad libs and, change the lines and add the funny. And we want to make sure we go to those first. So then it's re-reviewing the scenes with all this new dialogue, getting that approved with the director. We go to animation dailies where we're watching, seeing what they've done. So we're very busy for the 3 years.
No, I'm glad you mentioned all that because people, whether it's live action or whether it's animation, it, I think sometimes people don't appreciate the amount of work that goes behind it, whether the film is good or not, because it's a lot of years of your life that you've sort of been put, as well as physically as well as emotionally, right? And I,
100%.
I just I just want to go back to something else right now. It's a tough question because you can't pick and choose. What would be one of your favorite live action movie and animation slash Pixar movie that you really like? For me, Toy Story holds very special, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so hard because there are the movies
There's
I
so
love
many.
from like a
Yeah.
cinematic point of view. Like I'm a huge Hitchcock fan. So Rear Window, I wrote 2 different papers on Rear Window in college because I love it so much. But then Princess Bride, I've literally seen hundreds of times just because
Oh, love that
I
movie.
love that movie. It is fun, it's adventure, it's, all ages. And I'm a huge Muppets fan. So Muppet Caper, The Great Muppet Caper it's just a movie that when I'm not feeling well, I just want to watch a Great Muppet Caper. So there, so there's that. And, within animation, I mean, there's so many to choose from. I mean, when I was little, like Cinderella, I just wanted to watch over and over again, and now with Pixar movies, there's so many amazing ones to choose from. I love Up. I love, the first Inside Out. I love The Incredibles.
Yeah.
It's so hard to choose, and especially now, like that I get to know so many of the filmmakers involved in those movies and their hearts behind them. It's hard to choose.
And this is something that's discussed a lot of times, especially in the early days of Pixar. It's talked about nowadays too, but not as much. What is the core essence of Pixar that is different from other live action studios or animation studios?
That's a great question. And I hope I'll do my best to define it. Pixar is one of the last remaining studios that does everything in-house in the United States. Almost every other studio now has outsourced locations. And so it's really special for us to all be in the same buildings together on campus, all trying to achieve just the best version of the movie possible. And the amount that everyone in the studio just wants to help every movie be the best it can be is really fantastic. It's really not like this crew and that crew. Like we got so much help from so many different, editors along the way when we needed it, when we were in a crunch. And I just, that collaboration, that teamwork, that striving for excellence, is just, it's fantastic. And I understand like budgets don't allow for that everywhere, and there's just a reality of it being a business, but it is such a gift to be working with such talent and given the freedom to like just really continually strive to make the movies the best they can be.
And would it be fair to say that Pixar still operates independently from Disney other than distribution in terms of the production and, or, just because Disney is obviously they own Pixar, right? But
Yeah.
is it still the same way as it used to be 20 years ago?
I mean, I feel like, yeah, I mean, when I'm here, I'm at Pixar. We do take our movies down to Disney one time during the cycle of production, and we get great feedback from their story
Of course.
teams,
Yeah.
which is awesome. Like that's a great relationship to have, to get some fresh eyes, before you're ready for a preview audience and totally, new eyes. But yeah, I mean, Pixar is definitely has its own identity and its own culture and is, very much a community here in the Bay Area.
Lovely. Where is it in Bay Area, Pixar? I visit the Bay Area quite often.
Oh, sure. We're in Emeryville, so we're across from San
Uh
Francisco in the East Bay.
yes, I know exactly where that is. Awesome. I gotta pop in one of the days when guys
Yeah, come for a
ready.
visit.
Going back to Inside Out 2, do you remember a specific day? And this is not for any controversy or drama. It's just because, we always have our days where we're tired, or days where we're not, and it's just that's life. Do you
Sure.
remember a specific day when you were working on a particular scene where, you like a brain freeze or you couldn't move forward because, and how you sort of dealt with that
Hmm. It's a
as with
great
emotions that
question.
you have?
Sure, sure. No, that's a great question. I think it was usually less about a scene and kind of like watching a chunk of scenes together and being like, like, what's, kind of feeling like, oh, I feel like there's something missing. Like, what ideas do I have to kind of get this to the next level or, get this true to what we're trying to say in this movie. And sometimes it's when I'm working alone late at night, like the rest of the team's gone home and I'm kind of catching up on work and putting things together to check on things. And but what's great is knowing every day that it is a collaborative process. So if I don't have the answer, like the most important thing is to talk about it with these amazing creative minds around me and figure out a way through it and a way to make it better. But yeah, I mean, every show is hard, and certainly, we had a lot of crunch times in the end, the last 6 months. But it was amazing how in sync everyone was by then in terms of just delivering great work. So whatever you were getting was awesome. It was just a matter of like there was a lot of it coming in.
Sure. No, that's a great answer. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, was there, and you kind of touched upon it a little bit. I mean, you talked about different emotions, but was there a specific scene that you really liked,
Hmm.
um, that had to go out? And if so, what was that? I'm sure there were more than one, but if you want to
Sure.
name.
There were a few. Unfortunately, we had to lose like a lot of fun stuff here. I'd say my top two. Um, Maybe I'll say three. So my first one was we had this scene called Pool Party, which actually we ended up taking pieces and putting them in other scenes, but Riley showed up to this high school pool party in her like one piece swimsuit with like a sun, like a cartoon sun with shades on, and everyone else is in like bikinis and super cool. And like the story artist who tackled the first time, Becca McVeigh, she just really captured the like social anxiety and the awkwardness of like, what do I do with my hands? Where do I stand? And like, she leans on a table and starts tipping over. And like, that is the part of the scene that we were like, oh my gosh, we have to find a place for that. So we ended up using that kind of language with the emotions going off while we're watching Riley in Awkward Walk, which is in the final movie. But anyway, we didn't end up needing a pool party, and the story of Riley and that whole thing kind of changed dramatically. But it was a great learning from that scene that we were able to kind of find a place for later. And then the one that we just couldn't is Procrastination Land was hilarious. Every time we put it up, Jeff Call boarded it and came up with a lot of the jokes. It was basically the emotions were running away from, usually it was mind cops. We tried it so many different places because we loved it so much, but they were running away from mind cops. And so they find like this access gate they run through, and only the audience sees that it's called Procrastination Land. So they're running, running, and then all of a sudden anger starts slowing down. And Joy's like, come on, you got to keep going. And then all of a sudden you cut back to anger and he's like on a couch. And like they're all yelling in anger. And then when you cut back to anger, disgust is next to him on a couch. Anyway, it was this hilarious scene, but it did, they had to get stuck there. It's procrastination land. And no matter where we tried it in Act Two, it just slowed the
Doesn't work.
whole movie
Yeah.
down. And we just, Louise Smythe, who was our story lead, like always called it, like, oh, it's like the poppy scene in Wizard of Oz. Like maybe it can, then you want to launch them into and we tried, we tried at the end of Act Two, and we just couldn't find a spot for it that didn't stop the whole movie. And I think because we had the vault scene, which is a hilarious scene, and I love it, but it's also them kind of in one place for a while, to have another one in that similar vein of like they're just stuck somewhere. Anyway, it was just hard to do them both, and we loved the vault scene so much. It was definitely staying. So rest in peace, procrastination land.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that as well. What do you remember um the first lot? Maybe I'll ask this question in two different parts. So the first screening, which was where the film was more or less done, slash and or the final locked version, being in the theater, and just that's something that I always do when I have a film that I it's playing in the movie theater. I don't care about what's on the screen. I care about how the audience is reacting to it, right? Like a
Mhm.
lot of us do. Do you remember that moment and just kind of that set of emotions that we're going through, being a part of such a beautiful film as well?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting thing being an editorial, because like we've seen it up at Skywalker, we've seen it, like it's so much that yeah, definitely the first time you're with a new audience. And I think we had some friends and family screenings at Pixar before it was released. So that was kind of my first time with a relatively fresh audience. It's still Pixar folks, but they brought their families, they brought their friends. And like getting to hear people laugh at the jokes that we've been living with for 2 years, 3 years, and also just like hearing some sniffles, around me as the ending came through. It was really heartwarming, because I think by the end of these movies, it can be really hard to tell,
Yeah,
you've done all the work to believe that it's working, but like you're just not sure because you've seen it a lot. So it's been really special. And like I said, throughout the release, just getting to hear from people about, how their kids have enjoyed it, how it's connected their family. It's really special to get to work on a project like this.
I bet. You said ending. The way it ends is beautiful. I couldn't have enjoyed a better ending, just looking at the camera and just smiling, and then did she get it or did she not get it, right? And was that always the case, or were there other iterations or versions of the actual finale scene?
That was probably the shot. That last shot was the one that got futzed with the most, in terms of like add 8 frames, take 30 off, add 24 back. Because we always wanted it to be slightly nebulous. Like, because the
Right.
point of the movie is she'll be okay. No, we've gotten her to this place where she will be okay no matter what. But I think there was but you still wanted to have an optimism at the end. You wanted to feel that joy, and that you could sense that Riley was happy. So it was a delicate balance. The animators kept bringing it, like the nuance they were able to capture in her expressions throughout the ending, but especially in that last shot it's beautiful. And then Andrea Datzman, the way she handled the music, I think really nailed that feeling as well with that last note.
Yeah. No, the music was great too. Like, I mean, I said it earlier, everything about this film was, to me, what Pixar has been about for the last, 30, 31 years. And it's just so amazing to see that. Now, would there be an Inside Out 3? I would love to see it. Because, you get to explore more emotion, especially suspicion. That's something I would love to see.
Okay, I'll put
Uh,
suspicion on the list.
But at D23, Disney announced a lot of new projects that are coming out, and please correct me if I'm wrong. There's the new Toy Story coming out. There's Incredibles. Um, there's a couple more that I forget now. The Pixar. Do you remember which ones they are?
So Elio's out next year, and then I think they
Right.
also announced Hoppers.
Yes.
as well as the streaming series, which are amazing. I've gotten to see both of them, and they are so good. Yeah, Win or Lose is unlike anything Pixar's done, and it's just incredible. I loved it so much. I was emotional from every episode, like in a really great way. And then the Dream production series is great. Like I'll be actually so excited to get to go back to the Inside Out world, when it comes out on Disney Plus and relive it with Dream
Yeah.
Productions.
What are some of the shorts that you've enjoyed from Pixar? I mean, there's quite a
Gosh.
few that used to come out in the beginning. Remember, like the
Yeah, it's so
birds
hard.
and
Oh gosh, I feel like I needed to study for this quiz. Well,
no,
tell me about your favorites.
I just remembered randomly because I never have any questions prepared. So just like a random conversation. I love the birds one. I think that was it was called
Mm,
For the Birds, right? I think.
yeah, yeah.
And
I
then it
love For the
was
Birds.
the old man playing chess. That was really cool. I forget the names. Obviously the lamp one, the Pixar
Yeah, the
logo.
original. Yeah.
But Pixar has done some great stuff, and yeah,
I've also really loved the Doug Days shorts. I know that only one of them ended up ahead of a feature, but like they're on Disney Plus and they're just with Doug from Up and
yeah, yeah.
Carl, and they're every one of them is so sweet. I'm also a dog owner, so
Ah,
extra invested.
I bet. So Inside Out 2 comes out next week on digital on August 20th, I think. That's what I
That's right.
read at least. And then it comes on DVD on September 10th.
I think
So
that's right. Yes, that sounds right.
yeah, yeah. And you'll have a whole new audience of people to watch it again. I know you're probably not allowed to, but I have to ask anyway. Anything exciting you're working on? You don't have to say the name. I just
Oh,
want to
I'm
know if
very excited. Actually, I get to spend some time helping other shows that might just be in a crunch period. So I'm actually really excited to just see what the other shows are up to and help out in any way I can. So yeah, it's a good thing for me to get to like uh after being on one project for so long, get to like sample a few different projects and really get to know even more people here at Pixar because obviously people have been here for decades. So I've only been here for 3 years. I'm still very much a newbie
yeah.
here at Pixar and everyone's so talented and so wonderful. It's great to get to, expand my work knowledge with them.
What's one Pixar franchise, again, something down the road that you would love to work on that could it be Toy Story, could it be Cars, could be Incredibles, Finding Nemo, another iteration of it. What would that be?
Oh gosh, I would love to work on any of them. Like I just think there's so much to mine from all these amazing worlds that Pixar has created. I do love The Incredibles. They're my favorite family. Uh, I think, if there was a way to explore the Up world in a new way, I love that. And honestly now, like it's funny, usually after this long on a movie, I'd be kind of like, I'll step away from those characters now. I love our emotions and the inside out world so much. Like I would love to spend more time with them one day.
I can tell in the excitement you have in your voice and everything that you truly had a great time working on this film, and partially probably because emotions are something that is part of all of us, right? Like we can
Yes,
all relate to it
it's
certain way.
so relatable and it was so great to, be able to like talk about your own experiences and what emotions come up and then like kind of have the movie teach me about dealing with anxiety as well. So much of it's great to have Lisa D'Amour and Dacher Keltner, like real psychologists helping educate us on tools that we should be using and like pitfalls that teenagers fall into. So it was great to even kind of learn about my own teenage experience through making this movie.
Just to wrap things up, with the fact that you mentioned it, what was something that you learned about any of the emotions that you have sort of started to apply into your daily routine or your life?
It's interesting. I mean, I certainly think, Lisa talked a lot about healthy anxiety and that it is something we all need and it can help us. It's just also needs to be checked when it's, spiraling out and talking about things we have no control over or aren't happening right now. Like that there is no indication that that is going to happen right now. So I think that's something that's been really helpful to keep in mind. I think as we were movie making, it's not something I'm really bringing into my life, but for a while we had a lot of trouble cracking envy. Like it was really easy for envy to be kind of a one note character of like, I want that, I want that. And I got really lucky that Lisa came to the studio one time. She was on a book tour, and her daughter came too. And so they came to my office and watched some stuff. And I was like, can I just ask you one question? How is anxiety good for us? Like, how can it help teenagers? What is the good side? And she's like, oh, I mean, sorry, envy. Envy's amazing. Like, it can help you set goals. It can be motivating. It's about like looking at the world and people around you and saying, oh, I would like to be more like that. Like they are the captain of the hockey team. What do I need to do to achieve that goal? And it's only and actually that, like, especially within teenagers, when they don't have control over the situation. So things like having a luxury handbag that, your friend has, but you just don't have the money for that. That's when envy gets ugly, because you just don't feel like you have any control over making that happen. So anyway, it was such an interesting thing to learn from her. And then I think it really helped us, crack the character of envy to show the good and the bad. And then obviously Io brought like amazing hilarity to her lines and like did amazing ad libs every time that we mined for gold. So it was a perfect compliment to the character.
It's interesting you mentioned teenagers. I think this problem lies with older people as well.
Oh, sure.
Probably less,
Yes.
right? Probably less, but I think all these emotions, right? Anger is good as long as it doesn't turn to rage. You know, um, you know, what are the anxiety is good as long as it doesn't drive you bonkers. Like all these emotions, I feel that they're so necessary, but I feel, and it's probably because social media, again, this is not just limited to kids and teenagers. I even
Sure.
think it's for people like in their 30s and 40s, is
Totally.
that we tend to let emotions take over us. And sometimes even the littlest emotion, like a little worry, people will blow it up out of proportion. Like, I have anxiety. No, you don't have anxiety. It's just called being worried about something. Anxiety is very, very intense. And I don't think people understand the intensity of anxiety. Like the way it was in the movie at the end when everything was going nuts, like the anxiety was like at its peak level. I think that's anxiety, right? So the film has great lessons and great stories and great characters that people will learn from, that you have to learn to deal with your emotions, not reject them completely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that's always been really important to Pete and Kelsey, of showing like that every emotion within us has a good, and has a purpose for us to protect us and help us. And so yeah, that's what we were going for.
100% awesome. Thank you so much, Maurissa, for your time. It's been a delight and pleasure
Thank
to
you.
speak to you. I would love to speak to you in future sometime, whatever you're working on next, and we'll do that when the time comes.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And the Inside Out 2 comes out on August 20th on digital and September 10th on DVD.